What would you do if one day you found out that the people you trusted most, your own family, had been weaving lies so thick, so carefully that you couldn't even be sure your son was really your son? Not because of something your partner did, but because of something your mother did. That's the kind of betrayal that doesn't just sting, it shatters every memory you thought was safe. I'm not talking about catching someone gossiping or discovering an old family secret buried in the past. I'm talking about staring at my own mother across the kitchen table, hearing words come out of her mouth that turned my entire world upside down. He might not be yours. The story began years before, though at the time I didn't know it. I was young when I met the woman who would eventually become my wife. We weren't perfect, we fought like any couple, but when she told me she was pregnant, I remember feeling something shift in me. Fear, yes, but also this surge of determination. I promised myself I'd be better than my father, who'd walked out when I was little. I swore I'd give my son the stability I never had. And when he was born, when I held him in my arms for the first time, none of the noise around us mattered. He was mine. At least, that's what I believed. But here's where things start to twist. From the very beginning, my mother had a strange way of inserting herself into our lives. She wasn't just the doting grandma who baked cookies or babysat on weekends. She was involved, overly involved. She'd make comments about my wife, sly little digs about her being too flirty or not the settling down type. At first, I brushed it off as jealousy or overprotectiveness, but then she started saying things about the baby. Innocent at first. He doesn't have your nose, or are you sure he's yours? He looks so different from when you were born. She laughed when she said it, but there was an edge to it. And when I'd get angry, she'd brush it off. I'm just joking, don't be so sensitive. Fast forward a few years. My son is growing, thriving. He's smart, curious, stubborn in ways that remind me of myself. And yet my mother's comments didn't stop. They got sharper, more pointed. Sometimes when I wasn't in the room, I'd overhear her whispering to relatives, "Doesn't he look more like her side of the family? He doesn't have a trace of ours." I confronted her more than once, but she always denied it or flipped it back on me. "You're paranoid. Stop looking for problems." It was maddening. And then came the day everything cracked open. We were at her house for Sunday dinner, just me, her, and my boy. He'd gone outside to play in the yard, and I stayed behind to help clear the dishes. That's when she said it, almost casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "You know, you might not be his real father." The plate slipped out of my hand and shattered on the floor. I thought I'd misheard. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't look at me. She just kept wiping the counter and repeated it. Slower this time, more deliberate. "You might not be his real father." My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear. I asked her what she meant, and she shrugged, as though she hadn't just detonated a bomb in my chest. "Let's just say your wife wasn't the only one around when she got pregnant." The room spun, my hands clenched into fists. I wanted to believe she was lying, just being cruel. But the way she said it, the calmness, the certainty, it wasn't like a joke. It was like she was finally saying something she'd kept in for years. I pressed her for details, my voice breaking, but she wouldn't say more, just kept repeating, "You should look into it." I left that night in a fog. Drove home with my son in the back seat, chattering about the game he'd been playing, while inside I was collapsing. Every glance in the rearview mirror felt like a question I couldn't answer. Was he mine? Was my entire fatherhood a lie? I didn't sleep for days. I tried to confront my wife, but the words caught in my throat. What if it wasn't true? What if my mother was just manipulating me, trying to destroy what I had? But the doubt burrowed deep. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. His eye color, his laugh, the shape of his hands. Things that might be mine or might not. And then I remembered something else. This wasn't the first time my mother had done something like this. Years ago, when my younger sister had her first child, my mother had pulled a similar stunt. Whispered that the baby didn't look like the father. Spread rumors until the marriage cracked under the weight of suspicion. At the time, I thought it was just idle gossip. Now I wondered if it was a pattern. A sick pattern. I began digging quietly. Old text messages, conversations, fragments of memory. I found nothing concrete, just enough to keep me spinning. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One night after my son had gone to bed, I asked my wife directly. My voice shook as I said the words, "Is he mine?" She looked at me like I'd slapped her, her eyes filled with tears, and she swore up and down that he was. She screamed, cried, demanded to know why I'd even think such a thing. When I told her what my mother had said, her face went pale, not angry pale, scared pale. And that reaction, that's what haunts me, because in that moment, I didn't know who to believe. My wife, whose reaction could have been righteous anger or guilty fear. Or my mother, whose history of manipulation made her untrustworthy, but whose calm delivery made it impossible to ignore. That night, I sat in my son's room after he fell asleep, watching him breathe, listening to the soft rhythm of his chest rising and falling. I thought about the first time I held him, about teaching him to ride a bike, about the way he calls me dad like it's the most natural thing in the world. And I asked myself, does biology matter more than this? Does DNA define fatherhood? Or is it the years of showing up, of loving, of being there? But deep down, I knew I couldn't live in limbo. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. And that's where the real story begins. The night after I confronted my wife, I sat alone in the living room long after she'd gone to bed. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. I couldn't shake the image of her face, the way her eyes had gone pale when I asked the question, the way her voice cracked, not just with anger but with something else, something harder to read. Guilt? Fear? Or just the shock of knowing my mother had gotten inside my head? I didn't know. All I knew was that the ground beneath me felt unsteady, like I was standing on a bridge that could collapse at any second. Over the next few days, I went through the motions of life, but nothing felt real. At work, I stared at my computer screen and realized I hadn't processed a single email. At home, I watched my son play with his Legos, building castles and towers with that focus kids have, and every time he laughed, I felt a stab of guilt. Because no matter what the truth was, he deserved better than the storm raging inside me. He deserved a father who wasn't looking at him like a riddle that needed solving. I thought about DNA tests. I thought about secretly swabbing his cheek while he slept, or pretending it was some kind of school project. But every time I imagined it, I felt sick. What would that say about me, that I was willing to sneak behind his back, behind my wife's back, to confirm what my heart already knew? Because here's the thing, when I stopped thinking about my mother, when I stopped thinking about the lies and the whispers, and I just looked at my son, everything in me screamed that he was mine. Maybe not by blood, I still didn't know, but by every other measure that mattered. Still, the doubt wouldn't go away. It sat there like a stone in my gut, weighing down every interaction. My wife could sense it too. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary, every conversation edged with tension. She insisted we go to counseling, but I wasn't ready. How do you sit in a room with a stranger and explain that the fracture in your marriage isn't about cheating, or money, or intimacy? It's about your own mother planting a seed of poison that's now growing wild. It was my sister who finally broke the silence. She called me one evening, her voice low, urgent. "Mom's been saying things again," she told me. My stomach dropped. "About me?" I asked. "About everyone," she said. She told me my daughter looks nothing like her dad. She told our cousin that his wife probably has a secret. She even said something about Aunt Carol back in the day, that her youngest might not be Uncle Paul's. It's like she gets off on it, like she wants to plant suspicion everywhere. That was when the pieces started clicking together. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't just about my son. This was a pattern. A sickness, maybe, or some twisted habit my mother had carried with her for decades. I remembered being a kid and overhearing her on the phone, whispering about neighbors and relatives, always with that same sly tone. At the time, I thought it was just gossip, but now, as an adult, I realized it was something darker. She thrived on control, on creating chaos, then sitting back and watching people unravel. The next time I saw her, I asked directly. We were sitting in her kitchen, the same place she'd dropped the bomb on me weeks earlier. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Why do you do this? Why do you try to make me doubt my own family?" She didn't flinch. She just sipped her coffee and said, "Better to know the truth than to live a lie." But the thing is, she never had proof. Not once. Not about me. Not about my sister. Not about anyone. Just innuendos, just whispers, just enough to crack the foundation of trust. That was her power. And I realized then that confronting her wouldn't fix anything. She wasn't going to stop. If I wanted peace, I had to stop giving her access to my life. So I made a choice. I sat down with my wife and told her everything about my doubts, about the counseling, about my sister's call, about the years of whispered poison. I braced myself for her to explode again, to walk out, to accuse me of not trusting her. But this time she didn't. She cried. Yes, but there was something different in her tears. Not just hurt, but exhaustion. She told me she'd lived with my mother's comments for years, too, that she'd ignored them, laughed them off. But deep down, they had always left scars. "I love you," she said, "but I can't fight her in you. You have to decide whose voice you're going to listen to." That hit me like a punch to the chest. Because she was right. I had been straddling the line, trying to be the son who listened to his mother while also being the husband and father my family needed. And it wasn't working. One had to go. So I cut ties. Not in some dramatic shouting match, not with slammed doors or ultimatums. I simply stopped answering the calls. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. I stopped letting her words take root. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. But freedom doesn't erase the damage overnight. It took months of rebuilding with my wife, of proving to her that I was on her side, of showing my son with every hug, every bedtime story, every laugh that I wasn't going anywhere. We did eventually go to counseling. Not because I doubted her anymore, but because we needed to learn how to heal from the cracks my mother had caused. And slowly we did. Do I know for certain that my son is mine biologically? No, I never took the test. Maybe one day I will, maybe I won't. But here's what I do know. He is mine in every way that matters. I am the one who holds him when he's sick. I am the one who teaches him how to throw a ball, how to ride a bike, how to be kind in a world that isn't always kind back. And no lie, no whisper, no manipulative comment from anyone, not even my own mother can take that away. Sometimes late at night, I wonder what drives a person to do what she did. Maybe she was jealous. Maybe she was bitter about her own life and wanted to spread that bitterness to everyone else. Maybe she just liked watching the chaos. I don't know. And honestly, I don't need to anymore. Because the lesson I took from all of this is that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Family isn't about DNA or last names. Family is about who protects you, who lifts you, who refuses to let you drown in lies. My mother wasn't the first to lie. She'd been lying for years. To me, to my siblings, to anyone she could sink her claws into. But she will be the last to control me. I won't pass that poison down to my son. He will grow up knowing the truth, not about DNA or gossip, but about what love really means. And that's how I survived it, not by proving her wrong, not by demanding answers she was never going to give, but by choosing whose truth mattered. Mine, my wife's, my son's. The truth we build every day in the small, quiet moments of family that no one can fake. So if you ask me now who the father of my son is, I'll answer without hesitation. I am. Not because a test told me so, not because my mother approves, but because I choose to be. And in the end, that's the only truth that matters.